Snow fell heavy on the metal roofs of the colony, each flake glowing faint blue under the weak lamps. The night was colder than anyone remembered, the kind of cold that made the air cut through skin and bone. Doors were locked, curtains drawn, and heaters hummed inside the homes. But out in the storm, one figure moved slowly from door to door, wrapped in a thin cloth that could not fight the bitter wind. She was an alien widow, her skin pale and lined from hunger, her eyes tired from too many nights without rest. Her husband was long gone, taken by the war, her child, buried in the frozen ground last season. She had nothing left but her breath, and even that was growing weak. She reached the first house. Her hand shook as she knocked on the metal door. A moment later, a man opened it just a crack. His eyes narrowed when he saw her face. "You again," he muttered. "We told you before, no room for your kind." She tried to speak, but her lips froze into silence. The man slammed the door, and the sound echoed in the empty street. She staggered to the next house. Another knock, another door opening, another human face full of distrust. "You bring bad luck," the woman inside hissed. "When your people came here, death followed. Leave before you curse us all." The widow's knees almost gave out, but she pushed herself forward. She went from one door to another, begging with her weak voice. Some cursed at her, some spat on the snow near her feet, and some only closed their doors without a word. The wind howled around the colony walls, carrying her breath away, making her stumble. She wrapped her arms around herself, but it was useless. The cold was sharper than knives, and it slipped into her body no matter how tightly she held her thin cloth. Her feet carried her toward the last row of houses. By now, her body was shaking, without control. Her vision blurred, and every step felt like lifting a mountain. She knocked again. An older man opened the door. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You should not be here," he said harshly. "Go die in the wasteland like the rest of your kind." The door slammed shut. She leaned against the wall, her chest burning from the icy air. The colony lights seemed far away, flickering like stars. She could no longer feel her fingers. She sank down into the snow, her breath coming out in short gasps. The night grew darker, and she thought maybe this was the end. Maybe this was how her story would close. Alone, unwanted, frozen. She closed her eyes, letting the storm carry her away. Then, a sound. Boots crunching in the snow. Slow, steady steps coming closer. For a moment, she thought it was another colonist coming to chase her away. She did not lift her head. She no longer had the strength. The steps stopped near her. A voice spoke, deep and rough, but not cruel. "You'll die out here." She opened her eyes a little, just enough to see the shape of a man standing above her. A human. He was taller than most, with broad shoulders and a thick coat. His face was scarred, one eye narrowed as if he was used to squinting against battlefields or storms. He looked down at her with no smile, no kindness, but also no hatred. She tried to whisper, but her throat was frozen. He sighed, kneeling beside her. Damn fools, letting someone freeze to death on their doorstep. She felt strong arms lift her up. For the first time in years, she was carried like she mattered. The world spun as he pulled her close, her head against his chest where she could feel warmth. He turned and walked toward his cabin at the edge of the colony. The door opened with a loud creak. The heat of firelight spilled into the snow, chasing away the shadows. The widow blinked in shock as he carried her inside. The human kicked the door shut behind him. "Don't get the wrong idea," he muttered. "I don't care who you are. No one deserves to freeze to death out there." He set her down near the fire. She felt the warmth spread slowly through her body, painful at first, then softer, like life returning. Her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but no words came out. The human tossed another log into the flames, the sparks dancing high. He glanced at her again, his jaw tight, as if he already regretted what he had done. Outside, the storm howled and the colony slept. But inside that small cabin, a new story had begun, one that no one in the colony would ever expect. The fire cracked loudly in the small cabin, sparks floating up the chimney like tiny stars. The alien widow sat close to the flames, her thin hands stretched out, trying to feel life again in her frozen fingers. Her skin, once pale blue, now flushed red, as warmth returned, but every breath still trembled with weakness. The human who had carried her inside moved quietly across the room. He didn't speak much, but every motion was heavy and sure, like someone used to surviving alone. He took a metal pot, filled it with water, and placed it above the flames. The smell of wood smoke filled the cabin, mixing with the faint scent of old leather and oil. She glanced at him carefully. His coat was thick, patched many times, his boots scarred from long walks across frozen ground. His face carried old wounds, one across the jaw, another near the brow. This was not a man who lived an easy life. Her lips parted, a whisper escaping. Why? He didn't turn, just stirred the pot. Why what? Why help me? Her voice was faint, almost lost under the crackling fire. He gave a slow sigh, sitting on a wooden chair across from her. Because no one else would. Because I couldn't watch you die in the snow. His voice was rough, as if unused to gentle words. She lowered her gaze. They hate me. They say I bring bad luck. They hate what you are, he said sharply. Not who you are. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the flames. War made people see monsters everywhere, but I've seen worse than you. His words puzzled her. She studied his scars again. Could it be true that this man had once fought in the same war that had taken her husband? If so, why had he opened his door when everyone else shut theirs? The pot began to steam. He poured the hot water into a cup, added dried herbs from a small jar, and held it out to her. She took it with shaking hands, the warmth of the cup almost burning after the bitter cold outside. Drink, he said simply. She sipped slowly. The bitter taste filled her mouth, but the heat spread through her body, softening her shivers. Tears pricked her eyes, not just from the drink but from the strangeness of kindness. It had been so long since anyone had given her anything. You should sleep, the human said, moving to adjust the fire. The storm will last the night. Fear pricked her chest. Sleep. In another's home. A human's home. What if he changed his mind while she slept? What if he handed her to the colony guards at dawn? But her body was too weak to argue. Still, she forced out words. If I sleep, will you cast me out tomorrow? He paused, hand on the fire poker. Slowly, he looked at her. His eyes were tired, not cruel, but they carried weight. I don't make promises I can't keep. Tonight you're safe. Tomorrow? His jaw tightened. We'll see. Her heart sank. Safe for one night only. But even that was more than she had in months. She lay down near the fire, curling into herself, the thin cloth pulled tighter. Her eyes closed against her will, exhaustion pulling her under. Yet before sleep took her, she felt the strange comfort of warmth on her skin and the sound of fire nearby. The human stayed awake. He sat by the window, rifle across his knees, watching the storm outside. His mind wrestled with questions. Why had he brought her inside? Old wounds ached at the thought of the war. Friends buried in frozen soil, comrades lost to alien blades. And now, here one of them sat by his fire. But she wasn't holding a weapon. She was only trying to survive. He muttered under his breath, almost to himself. Maybe mercy isn't weakness. Hours passed. The storm roared against the cabin, but the fire inside burned steady. The widow stirred in her sleep, whispering in her alien tongue. Words he did not understand. Words soaked with sorrow. When dawn finally came, weak sunlight pushed through the frost-covered window. The human rose, stretching his sore muscles. He looked at the figure still curled near the fire. For the first time in many winters, his cabin didn't feel so empty. The widow woke slowly, blinking at the light. Her body still hurt, but she was alive. She sat up, eyes meeting his. Thank you, she whispered. The words carried all the weight of her lonely nights and endless rejections. He grunted, turning to prepare simple food: dried meat, hard bread, and boiled roots. He placed a piece in front of her. She stared, hesitant. "Eat," he said. "You'll need strength if you want to face the colony again." Her hands shook as she reached for the bread. The taste was rough, dry, but it filled her empty stomach like treasure. She looked at him with cautious hope. "What is your name?" He paused, then answered in a low voice. "Daniel." She repeated it softly, as if the name itself was strange, on her tongue. Daniel. For the first time, his lips twitched. Not a smile, but something close. Outside, the storm was ending. But inside the cabin, another storm was waiting, one that would come when the colony discovered that Daniel had given shelter to an alien widow. And in that small cabin, by the warm fire, 2 broken lives had taken the first step toward something neither of them expected. Morning came slow to the frozen colony. Thin sunlight crawled over the snow, turning the white ground into blinding glass. Smoke rose from chimneys as families gathered inside their warm homes. But outside, whispers spread faster than the cold. "Wind. Did you hear?" One voice murmured near the market. "They say Daniel brought her into his house last night," another replied. "Impossible. He wouldn't dare. I saw it with my own eyes. He carried her, the alien widow, through the storm. By noon, the whole colony knew. Daniel, the scarred human who lived at the edge of the walls, had given shelter to the widow no one else wanted. Daniel himself walked into town that day, shoulders straight, coat heavy against the wind. The widow had begged to follow him, but he told her to rest. He wanted to face the colonists alone. As he stepped into the small trading square, silence fell. Dozens of eyes turned to him. Faces hardened, voices whispered louder. One man finally spoke aloud. "Is it true, Daniel? Did you open your door to her?" Daniel met his stare without flinching. "Yes, I did." Gasps moved through the crowd. A woman shook her head in disgust. "After everything her kind has done, you brought the curse into your home?" Daniel's jaw tightened. She would have frozen to death. "That was her fate," another spat. "Better her body in the snow than her shadow on our walls." The crowd grew louder, angrier. Words like traitor and fool and curse were thrown into the air. One of the elders, a gray-haired man with a limp, stepped forward. He pointed a trembling hand at Daniel. "You risk all of us, don't you see? They killed our families. They burned our ships. And now you give one of them warmth? Do you want to invite their ghosts back to finish us?" Daniel stood silent for a moment, his hand resting on the strap of his worn rifle. He felt the weight of every eye pressing on him. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low but steady. "I fought in that war. I buried friends in the snow. I know what they did. But I also know what it means to watch someone die in front of you. I won't let it happen again. Not when I can stop it." The crowd shifted uneasily. Some looked down, ashamed. Others scowled harder, refusing to soften. "She will betray you," a woman hissed. "Mark my words, that alien will bring ruin on us all." Daniel turned his back on them without another word. Their anger followed him like daggers, but he did not slow his steps. He returned to his cabin where the widow waited by the fire. Her eyes searched his face when he entered. "They know, don't they?" He nodded. "They know." Her shoulders sank. "You should have left me outside. Now they'll hate you too." Daniel poured water into a cup, his movements rough, his silence heavier than the storm outside. After a long pause, he said, "Let them hate. I don't care." She stared at him, confused. "Why risk yourself?" "Because I've already lost. Enough," he answered simply. That night, the whispers grew into open talk. In the tavern, men raised their mugs and cursed Daniel's name. At the well, women warned their children not to go near his cabin. The colony guards debated if they should force him to give her up, but Daniel's cabin stood strong at the edge of the colony, firelight glowing through the frost on the windows. Inside, the widow sat near the fire, her hands clasped together. She felt warmth, but also fear. Every creak of the floorboards made her think of angry fists on the door. Every gust of wind outside sounded like the colony coming to drag her away. Daniel noticed her shaking. He crouched beside her. "You're safe here," he said firmly. She looked into his scarred face, searching for doubt, but found none. His voice carried no softness, yet his words held more comfort than any she had heard in years. Still, sleep did not come easy. She lay awake listening to the wind, waiting for the colony's anger to break through the door. And far away beyond the walls, another sound moved through the frozen night. The crunch of boots on snow. Not colonists this time, but strangers. Raiders drawn by the storm, by the smell of weakness in the air. The colony argued about the widow inside. None of them knew the real danger was already approaching from outside. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silent world of white. Snow clung to the roofs, heavy and sharp like frozen teeth. The colony stirred again, but Daniel's cabin felt cut off from it all. Inside, the fire still burned, throwing warm light across the rough wooden walls. The widow sat close to the flames, her body warmer now, but her heart restless. She had not spoken much since the colony's anger. Fear lived inside her like a second shadow. She knew hatred could turn to violence overnight. Daniel sharpened a hunting knife at the table. The scrape of steel against stone filled the quiet. He didn't look at her, but he felt her eyes on him. Finally, he spoke. "You haven't told me your name?" She hesitated, her throat dry. Her name had become a burden in the colony, spat out like poison. To say it again felt dangerous. But Daniel's steady tone gave her a little courage. "Leora," she whispered. "My name is Leora." Daniel nodded once, the name rolling through his mind. Leora. At last, she was no longer just the widow in his thoughts. She looked down at her hands. "You should know who I am, before you regret saving me." Daniel raised an eyebrow but stayed silent, waiting. Her voice trembled as she began. "I was born on a colony ship, not so different from yours. We dreamed of land, of harvest, of children laughing in the fields. My people wanted peace." Her eyes grew distant as if seeing ghosts. "But when the war came, peace meant nothing. My husband joined the defense fleets. He never came back." The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. Daniel kept sharpening the blade, though his jaw tightened. Leora's voice lowered. "I tried to raise my daughter alone. She was small, so full of life. She used to sing, even when our bellies were empty. But sickness came with the cold. I begged the colony for medicine. They refused. They said my blood was cursed. I watched her grow weaker, and one morning..." Her words broke, and tears filled her eyes. "She never woke again." Daniel set the knife down. For a long moment, the only sound was the fire. "I buried her in frozen ground," Leora whispered. "No marker, no prayer, just snow covering her face. After that, I had nothing. No one would give me work, no one would give me food. Every night I prayed the cold would take me. Last night, I thought it finally would." Her shoulders shook and she hid her face in her hands. Daniel rose slowly and walked to the fire. He stood over her, scarred face lit by orange glow. His eyes were heavy with memories he rarely shared. "I buried friends too," he said, voice low. "Men who fought beside me, brothers who trusted me. One minute alive, the next minute gone, because war doesn't care who you love or who you protect. It only takes." Leora looked up at him, tears still on her cheeks. For the first time, she saw not just a human soldier, but a man scarred by the same kind of loss. Daniel crouched beside her. "I don't know why fate left us breathing when it took them, but I won't let their ghost tell me who I can save." Her lips parted in shock. She had expected rejection, even after shelter, but instead, she found something she had never known from a human: understanding. The cabin grew quiet again, but it was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two broken lives beginning to recognize each other. That night, Leora slept deeper than before. No nightmares woke her. For the first time since her daughter's death, she dreamed of warmth instead of snow. Daniel, however, did not sleep so easily. He sat by the window watching the horizon. He had seen the tracks in the snow earlier, boots, not from the colony. Too many for a hunting party. Raiders. He looked back at Leora, curled near the fire. The colony feared her as a curse, but they didn't know the real danger walking closer with every hour. The fire burned low. Daniel whispered to himself, "If the raiders come, they'll find us ready." Outside, in the endless white, dark shapes, moved against the horizon, silent, patient, waiting for the night to cover their advance. The night was quiet, too quiet for a colony used to storms. No wind howled, no snow fell. Only the crunch of boots echoed faintly in the distance, hidden beyond the frozen ridges. Daniel stood outside his cabin, breath misting in the cold. He scanned the horizon, rifle slung across his chest. The tracks he had seen earlier weren't from colonists. Too many feet, too heavy for hunters. He knew the pattern well. Raiders. He cursed under his breath. The colony was busy spitting hatred at a widow, blind to the real danger creeping closer. Inside the cabin, Leora sat by the fire, her hands folded tight. She noticed the change in him when he came back in. His eyes were sharper, movements tense. "What is it?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Nothing you need to fear yet." But she read the truth in his scars and in the way his fingers never strayed far from his weapon. "It's not the colony, is it?" Daniel didn't answer. He pulled off his gloves and began checking the rifle, sliding rounds into the chamber, with practiced hands. The sound of metal clicked sharp in the silence. Leora's heart quickened. She had seen men prepare for battle before. Her husband used to do the same long ago. She stepped closer. "Raiders?" she whispered. Daniel's eyes flicked up. For a moment, surprise showed that she had guessed so quickly. Then he gave a single nod. She swallowed hard. "The colony will not believe you. They think only of me." "I know," Daniel muttered. "That's why we'll handle it ourselves, at least until they can't ignore it." The fire popped, throwing sparks into the air. Shadows danced across the walls like silent warnings. For hours, Daniel prepared. He checked traps near the tree line, reinforced the cabin door, and sharpened blades. Leora followed quietly, helping where she could, tying ropes, moving logs, setting water to boil. She was no soldier, but survival had taught her small skills. When he noticed her trying to lift a heavy crate, Daniel frowned. "You don't need to help." She straightened, her tired eyes hard. "If raiders come, they will not spare me because I sat idle. I will fight, or I will die fighting." For the first time, Daniel looked at her differently, not as a fragile widow, but as someone with steel still hidden beneath the grief. He gave a short nod. "Then stay close to me." As darkness deepened, the first signs came. A dog in the colony barked wildly before being silenced. A flicker of torchlight moved across the snow outside the walls. The raiders were testing the edges, waiting for weakness. Daniel kept watch at the window, his rifle resting on the sill. Leora stood beside him, clutching a kitchen blade with both hands. Her breath came fast, but she didn't back away. "They will come soon," she whispered. "Yes," Daniel said calmly, "and when they do, they'll learn this cabin is no easy prize." The night stretched long, filled with silence heavy as stone. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind made Leora's body tense. But Daniel's calm presence anchored her, even as danger crept closer. At last, movement stirred beyond the tree line. Shadows, 3, then 5, then more, slipped through the snow like wolves circling prey. Their armor was ragged, their weapons mismatched but deadly. Daniel's voice was low but steady. "Stay by the fire. If the door breaks, use that blade. Aim for the throat or the gut. Don't hesitate." Leora's grip tightened, her knuckles white. She wanted to tell him she was afraid, but the words died in her throat. She could not show fear now. The first raider tested the cabin wall, pressing a hand against the wood. Another rattled the window shutters. A third crept toward the door. Daniel raised his rifle, eyes hard as iron. "Not tonight," he whispered, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot shattered the silence, echoing across the colony. One raider fell into the snow with a scream. The others roared, charging the cabin with weapons raised. Leora gasped, heart racing as Daniel fired again. Another raider dropped, but more kept coming. The door shuddered under a heavy blow. Wood. Cracked hinges groaned. Leora pressed her back against the wall, blade ready. She thought of her daughter, of her husband, of all the nights she had been helpless. Not tonight. Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold the line." The cabin filled with smoke and firelight. Shadows of men with blood in their eyes pressing closer. The colony still slept, blind to the danger. But in this small cabin at the edge of the walls, one human and one alien widow stood together, ready to face the storm of blades and fire that waited outside. And the night was just beginning. The cabin shook under the weight of raider boots. Fists hammered against the wood, blades scraped the walls, and voices shouted in a rough tongue. The fire inside hissed, sparks flying up the chimney as if the flames themselves feared what was coming. Daniel stood steady, rifle braced against his shoulder. His eyes were sharp, his breathing slow, as though battle was an old companion. Beside the fire, Leora gripped her knife with both hands, her body trembling but her gaze unbroken. The door cracked with another heavy blow. Snow whirled through the gaps, biting the warm air. Daniel called out, voice like iron. "Stay close, Leora. Don't move unless I tell you." She nodded, though her chest ached with fear. The door burst open with a crash. 3 raiders stormed. Inside, their breath steaming, their weapons raised. The first swung an axe toward Daniel's head, but the soldier ducked, his rifle flashing thunder. The raider fell with a scream, blood staining the snow at the threshold. The second rushed, Leora thinking her an easy kill. For a heartbeat, her mind froze. Then her daughter's face flashed in memory, small, smiling, fragile. Leora's arms moved before thought could stop them. She drove the knife forward, straight into the raider's gut. His roar filled the cabin. As he stumbled back, shock in his eyes. Daniel spun, firing another shot that dropped the third raider before he could swing his blade. Smoke burned the air, mixing with the smell of blood and snow. Leora stood frozen, knife still buried in the raider she had struck. Her hands shook, but her eyes stayed locked on his collapsing body. She had killed for the first time. Not for war, not for pride, but for survival. Daniel's hand closed on her shoulder, steady and firm. "Good," he said, voice low. "You acted when it counted." Her chest heaved. I didn't think, You lived," Daniel cut in. "That's all that matters." But the fight was not over. More shadows moved outside, circling, like wolves around a wounded beast. Shouts rose and the sound of wood splintering came from the back wall. Daniel reloaded quickly. "They'll come through the windows next. We can't let them surround us." He moved to the side door, shoving a heavy table against it. Leora followed, grabbing logs from the firewood pile and stacking them against the broken window frame. Her fear had not vanished, but something else grew inside her now. Anger, sharp and hot. "These raiders," she hissed. "They killed my people before. They left families starving in the cold. I will not let them take more." Daniel looked at her then, really looked. For the first time he saw not a widow begging for shelter, but a fighter willing to bleed. He gave a short nod. "Then fight with me." The next wave came hard. Raiders smashed through the back wall, forcing their way inside. Daniel met them head on, his rifle cracking, his knife slashing when the bullets ran out. Leora darted at his side, striking with quick, desperate blows. Her hands burned, her arms ached, but she didn't stop. Together they drove the intruders back. Bodies fell across the cabin floor, blood soaking into the wooden planks. The fire roared higher, smoke curling thick around them. When the last raider fell, silence returned, broken only by the sound of their heavy breaths. Leora's hands were red, her blade dripping. She stared at Daniel, chest rising and falling. Why do they keep coming? Daniel wiped his knife clean on a fallen raider's cloak. His face was grim. Because they think we're weak. They think this colony is easy prey. Esau looked at her. But tonight we proved them wrong. Outside, faint shouts rose, the colony at last waking to the sound of battle. Lanterns flickered in the distance as guards rushed toward the edge of the walls. Leora sank against the wall, her strength nearly gone. The colony will think I brought them, she whispered. They'll blame me. Daniel crouched beside her, his scarred face close, his voice firm. Then let them. I know the truth. You stood with me. Without you, I'd be dead. That's not a curse. That's trust. Her eyes filled with tears, but not of sorrow. For the first time, someone believed her worth. She had killed, she had fought, but she had also been seen, not as a burden, not as a curse, but as a partner. Daniel rose and helped her to her feet. We'll face their anger tomorrow, but tonight we survived. And survival is the first step to victory. They stood together in the bloody cabin, fire crackling, shadows dancing across the walls. The raiders had been broken, but both knew it was only the beginning. The colony's anger had not faded, it had only been joined by fear, and when morning came, Daniel and Leora would stand together, not as enemies but as survivors who had fought side by side. The sun rose slowly, painting the snow in pale gold. Smoke drifted from Daniel's cabin, not from cooking fires but from the wreckage of the night. Broken wood littered the ground, blood stained the doorstep, and the silence of death hung heavy in the frozen air. Daniel stood outside, rifle across his back, eyes scanning the horizon. His body ached from the battle, but his stance was firm, as if daring the world to test him again. Beside him, Leora leaned against the doorframe. Her face was tired, her hands still raw from gripping the knife, but her eyes carried something new, strength. The colony guards finally arrived, their boots crunching through the snow. Behind them, villagers followed, whispering and pointing. The sight of raider corpses scattered around the cabin stole the breath from their throats. One guard stepped forward, face pale. Daniel, you fought them off? Alone? Daniel shook his head. Not alone. He nodded to Leora, standing straight despite the weight of every stare. She fought with me. Gasps spread through the crowd. Some glared at Leora, their anger sharp as knives. Others looked uncertain, shame flickering in their eyes. An elder pushed to the front, leaning on his cane. His voice was harsh. Do you expect us to believe she saved us? That alien widow who cursed this colony? Daniel's voice cut through the morning air, hard as stone. Believe what you want. But if we hadn't fought, the raiders would be inside your homes right now. Your children would be dead in their beds. She stood her ground when others would have run. She bled for this colony. Silence fell. No one dared argue. The corpses of raiders were proof enough. Leora lifted her chin, her voice trembling but clear. I asked only for shelter. You gave me hate. Last night, I could have left Daniel to die, but I chose to fight. Not for thanks. Not for acceptance. But because I will not watch another family torn apart. Her words struck deep. Mothers in the crowd lowered their eyes. Fathers shifted uneasily. Even the elder's grip on his cane faltered. Finally, a woman in the back whispered, Maybe we were wrong. The guards looked at one another, unsure. The elder scowled but said no more. The crowd began to drift away, their whispers softer now, not of curses but of doubt. When the last of them left, Daniel turned to Leora. You didn't have to speak. They'll never fully change. She looked at him, her eyes glistening. Maybe not. But if even one sees me as more than a curse, it is worth it. Daniel studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, a rare softness touching his scarred face. You've got more courage than half this colony put together. They went inside the cabin. The fire burned low, but it was enough to chase away the cold. Daniel poured water into a cup and handed it to her. Their hands brushed, and for a heartbeat, neither pulled away. Leora whispered, "I thought I would die alone in the snow. Now, I stand here because of you." Daniel shook his head. "You stand because of yourself. You didn't give up. That's what matters." The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, like the fire that had kept them alive through the storm. Days passed. The colony still watched them with suspicion, but fear of raiders softened some hearts. People came quietly to Daniel's cabin, leaving food at the door, or tools, to repair the broken walls. They never spoke much, but their actions told a new story. Maybe the widow wasn't cursed after all. One evening, Daniel returned from patrol to find Leora outside, clearing snow from the path. She looked up, breath misting in the cold. "You shouldn't fight alone anymore," she said softly. "If you'll have me, I will stand with you." Daniel looked at her, the weight of years of loss heavy in his chest. He thought of his fallen comrades, of the emptiness he had carried. Then he thought of the night they fought side by side, of the firelight on her face, of the trust that had grown between them. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "Not as long as I'm here." Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but something close. That night they sat by the fire together. Two survivors of war, two outcasts finding in each other what the world had stolen. The cabin, once silent, now held voices, warmth, and the faint promise of a future. Outside, the colony still whispered, but inside, a new story had begun. A human and an alien widow, once enemies by fate, now bound by trust, had chosen to stand,